follow it to see where it goes.
This bitch is going to get me in trouble. I can feel it.
Elm tree.
Mansion of Hidden Souls is a point-and-click style adventure game developed by System Sacom, and published by Vic Tokai in the United States, exclusively for the Sega CD in December of 1993. It's similar to games like Myst in that there aren't any enemies to fight, just puzzles to solve. All the graphics are pre-rendered movies that play as you move around and interact. A remake was made for the Sega Saturn, but I've heard it isn't any good, and I don't own it anyway. You play as Jonathan. You and your sister Samantha are exploring outside at night when you come across a butterfly. Samantha is taken with the butterfly's beauty and chases after it, despite your grandmother's warnings. Samantha chases the butterfly into a mansion that you don't remember seeing before.
Where am I? How can this be? There was no mansion here before.
This is where your adventure begins. You move forward by pushing up on the D-pad. You turn with the left and the right buttons, and pushing down turns you around. To interact with items, walk forward while facing what you want to interact with, and if you can't interact with it, you'll either back away from it or bump into it. Your inventory is under the A button. To cycle through your inventory, keep pressing it. To use a selected item, press the C button. You can't lose items or use them in the wrong place, so you can't put yourself in a no-win situation. In fact, I didn't run into any situations I couldn't get out of because I made a mistake with my items. I despise games that let you do that, so that's one mark in this game's favor. Even though you can't break the game with your actions, you can fail, which is fine because when you do, it doesn't feel cheap. But one thing I don't like is that you can't pick up items until the game wants you to. In fact, you can't even find items until you know to look for them. For instance, in the pink room, you can look at this chair. But until you get a clue to look there, you just back away from it. After you get the clue, you find a key under it. Why can't I get the key without getting the clue first? This almost makes the inventory irrelevant, because when you pick up a new item, it's usually going to be the next item you use. The puzzles are rather simple. Mansion of Hidden Souls uses some subtle and not so subtle hints throughout. For example, when you first enter the mansion, the camera pans to the left to show you a door. That's a hint that you should go there first, because that's the room that has the diary that you save your game with. The game also occasionally uses NPC dialogue to give you clues. Well, not so much clues as to your next step, but exposition concerning their personal history with a subtle clue thrown in occasionally. The problem with that is, sometimes there's an echo and reverb effect on the dialogue which makes it hard to understand. This is especially bad when you finally meet the villain.
Welcome, my young friend. So you seem to be lost, eh? Well then, allow me to introduce myself.
I think he's trying to intimidate and threaten me, but I can't make out hardly anything he's saying. The NPCs are forgettable. There are 5 butterflies throughout the house. Each one is a person who found the mansion and became a butterfly willingly, and may or may not regret their decision. They're always in the same rooms and never appear outside of them. You can't choose to interact with them. You're forced to the first time you enter their room and a few times after that. They don't do much of anything except add a very mild, bland flavor to the experience. They really don't offer any meaningful insight into what's going on. Even the villain only appears once. He never even taunts you before you encounter him. If the NPCs weren't there, I really wouldn't have missed them. The feature I'm probably most dissatisfied with is the black picture in the billiards room. When you interact with it, it'll show you what you need to do next. This is pretty much essential to advance the game sometimes. It even says so in the manual. The picture doesn't spell things out for you, and you can skip it if you figure out what you need to do, but it's not a very immersive way to get clues. At first I thought it was cool, but then I realized just how much the game relies on it. It would have been better to get clues through the NPCs. I think they could have been better utilized as clue givers instead of a picture on the wall. Just before the final puzzle, you acquire a clock. This immediately puts you on a time limit. This isn't a surprise if you've read the manual, but it's still annoying. Apparently, if you don't get out of the mansion by midnight, you and your sister will be turned into butterflies and trapped in the mansion forever. The clock only advances when you move, so if you need time to think, just don't move. There's a shortcut off the balcony where you can jump down without getting hurt. This shaves several steps off your trip. The final puzzle is a math puzzle of sorts, where you have to navigate through doors with numbers on them. If you go through the wrong door, you wind up back in the atrium. The black painting gives you the only clue of how to get through, and that's all I can really say without giving it away. But let's just say it's a surprising jump in complexity considering how simple the rest of the game is. Now, you're probably wondering, what's up with the frame rate? That's the actual frame rate of the game. That's also the actual resolution of the graphics. The Sega CD didn't have a lot of processing power, but I've seen better frame rates and resolution in other FMV games on the system. Sega CD games that use pre-rendered video put the video smaller in the screen to save on processing power. They usually try to hide this fact with gameplay graphics, like menus and such. I've cropped the video to make it larger in the frame, but this is what it looks like when it's uncropped. The lack of things to look at makes what is there even smaller. This is fine on an old 4x3 TV, but if you're playing on a modern TV, you might want to zoom to make things easier to see. The controls are just as sluggish as the frame rate. It takes sometimes half a second after you've pushed the D-pad or buttons for the game to react. Hidden Souls is compatible with the Sega Mega Mouse, so I thought I'd give it a try. The mouse makes the controls seem even less responsive. The item menu isn't conducive to using a mouse either. There's no pointer to use, just moving around. The Mega Mouse support was obviously an afterthought. They probably should have just left it out. The game is surprisingly short. I finished it in an afternoon. I don't know if they meant for it to be this short, or if they were hindered by the space limitations of the CD. Maybe the developers expected people to take longer exploring. The house isn't that big though, and you can't interact with things that you can't use, limiting exploration. I went into playing Mansion of Hidden Souls with high hopes. I was expecting a game with atmosphere and a different twist on the premise. I mean, I've never played a game about people who were changed into butterflies before. I can get past the low-quality graphics and, to a certain extent, the sluggish controls, but I think they tried to do too much with too little. The lack of interaction, depth, and length make this feel more like an introductory adventure game. Maybe that was the idea, considering point-and-click adventure games on consoles were few and far between compared to what was available on PC. But if it was supposed to be an introductory game, it didn't do a very good job. There's no real feeling of peril or urgency. It feels more like a leisurely stroll through a smallish mansion. Spoon-fed clues, a lack of interesting characters, and a thin story make this a lackluster title. It's not one of those games you'll be embarrassed to own, or even to have played, but it's not one you're likely to show off either.
Maybe it'll fly to the flower garden under the old elm tree.
No way! We better go home or we'll be in big trouble. Besides, Grandma...
Thanks for watching. I have other videos too. Check out these links to see what else I've done. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Facebook. You can find the links in the description.